I didn't move to Mill Creek because I wanted to. I moved because I ran out of options. When the eviction notice showed up, taped crookedly, to my apartment door back in St. Louis, I had exactly 11 days. A maxed-out credit card and a student loan payment I'd been dodging for almost a year. My car still ran, barely. And my cousin mentioned a small town in southern Illinois where rent was cheap and nobody asked questions if you kept your head down. Mill Creek had one main road, 2 gas stations, a diner that never closed, and a 24/7 pharmacy sitting right off the highway exit. The kind with fluorescent lights that never really turned off, even during the day. That pharmacy is the reason I'm telling this story. I applied online. Didn't even bother polishing my resume. When the store manager called me back an hour later and asked if I could work overnight shifts, I said yes before he finished the sentence. That's how desperate people answer questions. My first shift started on a Tuesday night, just before midnight. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a single semi-truck idling near the far curb and a flickering streetlight that buzzed like it was dying. Inside, the store smelled like disinfectant, old carpet, and something faintly medicinal that never quite went away. The aisles were narrow. Shelves packed tight with cough syrup, vitamins, candy bars, and the kind of off-brand painkillers nobody buys unless they're broke or hurting. Behind the counter stood Marcia. She was the daytime supervisor, late 50s maybe, hair pulled tight, eyes permanently tired. She didn't smile when I walked in. "You're the night guy," she said. Not a question. "Yeah." She nodded once and handed me a name badge already printed. No welcome speech. No paperwork. Just business. Training took 15 minutes. She showed me how to run the register, where the panic button was, how to unlock the pharmacy gate in case of emergencies. Her voice was flat, practiced, like she'd said the same words to too many people who didn't last. Bathrooms in the back. Don't let anyone behind the counter. If someone shoplifts, don't chase them. Cameras cover most blind spots, but not all. Not all, I asked. She looked at me for a second longer than necessary. You'll see. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a thick black binder. It hit the countertop with a heavy thud. The cover read After Hours Procedures. Store hash 1847. The binder was at least 3 inches thick. Corners bent. Spine cracked like it had been opened 1,000 times. Everything else is in here, she said. I flipped it open. The first few sections looked normal enough. Loss prevention, emergency contacts, robbery protocol, instructions for handling aggressive customers and drug seekers. Pages and pages of corporate language designed to protect the company, not the employee. I relaxed a little. Then I turned the page. A laminated sheet sat at the front of the next section. No logo. No letterhead. Just a title in bold black font. Rules Overnight Operations. Below it were numbered entries. Each one had a timestamp. Rule 1 to 17 a.m. If the front door chime sounds and no one is visible, do not acknowledge it. Continue working until the sound stops. Rule 2 to 33 a.m. If a customer asks for items not sold in this store, politely redirect them to aisle 3. Do not follow. Rule 3 to 47 a.m. If the pharmacy gate rattles, step away from the counter and face the beverage coolers until it stops. Rule 431 a.m. Do not enter the restroom under any circumstances. I blinked, scrolled further. The rules kept going. Specific times, exact wording, no explanations. Is this a joke? I asked. Marcia didn't laugh. Read it. Memorize it. Follow it. What happens if I don't? She closed her purse and slipped it over her shoulder. People who don't finish the shift. That was the closest thing to a warning she gave me. She clocked out at 12:06 a.m., nodded once toward the binder, and walked out through the automatic doors. The night swallowed her up almost immediately. I was alone. The store felt different without her there. Quieter. Bigger. Like the aisles had stretched when no one was looking. I stood behind the counter and flipped through the binder again, this time slower. My rational brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a theft deterrent thing. Maybe the times lined up with past incidents. Corporate paranoia mixed with small-town superstition. I laughed under my breath. Sure, I muttered. Rules. I set the binder down and checked my phone too. 14 a.m., 3 minutes before Rule 1. The front doors were locked automatically at midnight. I knew that. I checked twice. The glass reflected only empty aisles and my own tired face under buzzing lights. At exactly 2:17 a.m. Ding. The door chime rang. Once, I looked up instantly. Nothing. The doors didn't move. No shadow past the glass. The parking lot outside was still empty, the semi-truck long gone. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. The chime didn't repeat. My skin prickled anyway. I forced a laugh and shook my head. Faulty sensor, I said aloud, mostly to hear a human voice. I went back to restocking gum near the register. That's when the security monitors flickered. One by one, the camera feeds came online. I hadn't touched them. The screen split into 4 views: front doors, aisle 5, pharmacy gate, and the stockroom hallway. Static rolled across the images for half a second. Then they stabilized. All feeds showed exactly what I expected. Empty aisles. Locked doors. No movement. But the red ray indicator blinked steadily, like it had just started recording something important. Behind me, somewhere deep in the store, I heard the soft mechanical click of a door unlocking. I turned slowly. The pharmacy gate was still closed. The restroom light, however, was on. And according to the binder, I wasn't supposed to go back there. Not after 3:01 a.m. I checked the clock 2:18 a.m. The cameras kept recording, like someone had just arrived. The rest of my first night tried hard to feel normal. That's the trick with places like Mill Creek. If you're not looking for something wrong, you can convince yourself nothing is. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with that steady, insect-like hum that every late-night store has. The air conditioner kicked on and off like it was breathing. Somewhere above the ceiling tiles, metal ductwork popped softly as it warmed and cooled. The local radio played through a tinny speaker behind the counter. A DJ with a tired voice talked about a high school football rivalry and a coming cold front, then faded into an ad for an all-you-can-eat fish fry at the VFW. Normal, small-town noise. At 12:40 a.m. a trucker came in for a bottle of water, beef jerky, and a pack of smokes. He didn't say much. Just nodded at me, paid in cash, and left without making eye contact like he'd been here before, and didn't want to get attached to the idea of me. At 1:22 a.m. a woman in a scrubs jacket showed up with dark circles under her eyes, grabbed cough drops and instant ramen, and asked if we had any real sleep meds. "We're out," I lied. Because Marcia had warned me about that exact kind of conversation. She sighed, paid with her card, and stood there for an extra second, like she wanted to say something else. Then she left, the automatic doors hissing shut behind her. At 1:57 a.m. a kid, maybe 19, maybe younger, wandered in wearing a hoodie too thin for November. He bought 2 energy drinks and a candy bar, then stood by the window for a while staring out at the highway like he was waiting for someone. He left at 2:06 a.m. After that, the store emptied out again. Just me, the humming lights, the soft whir of the cooler fans, and the security monitors that stayed on, even though I'd never turned them off. Every now and then I caught my reflection in the dark glass of the lottery display and didn't like how pale I looked under that sickly green-white lighting. The binder sat on the counter beside the register like a dare. I told myself I was overreacting. The chime at 2:17 was probably a sensor glitch. Old store, old tech, nothing supernatural about it. The kind of thing corporate would fix if it ever bothered upgrading anything in a town like this. Still, I kept glancing at the clock. 2:14, 2:15, 2:16. My throat went dry. I stepped behind the counter and pulled the binder closer, flipping it open to the laminated rules sheet again. My eyes locked on Rule 1. Rule 1: 2:17 a.m. If the front door chime sounds and no one is visible, do not acknowledge it. Continue working until the sound stops. I remembered Marcia's expression, flat, resigned. The way she'd said follow it. The second part wasn't on the laminated sheet. It was on the page behind it. Typed in plain black ink, like someone had added it later. Rule 1 addendum: at 2:17 a.m., you will remain at the front counter. You will not step away. You will keep your eyes on the clock until 2:18 a.m. has passed. If you feel compelled to check the door, do not. If you feel compelled to look at the security monitors, do not. A cold little thread ran up my spine. Because that wasn't corporate language. That was personal. Like someone had written it for the exact moment I was living. I looked at the clock again, 2:16. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but my feet stayed rooted behind the counter anyway. I put both hands on the countertop, like I was bracing for impact. The radio played an old country song about a man who lost his truck, his girl, and his dog. The DJ's voice cracked with cheerful artificiality between verses. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m. Ding! The front door chime rang once. My heart jumped hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I stared at the glass doors. Nothing moved. No shadow, no shape, no reflection that didn't belong to me and the store. The security monitor, labeled front entry, showed the same thing: empty parking lot, doors closed, the road beyond stretching black and wet under the streetlight. The chime didn't ring again. But something else happened. The electronic lock on the front doors clicked. Not loud, just a soft, clean tick that didn't belong in a locked building. The kind of sound you only notice when you're already tense. The little red locked indicator on the door panel went dark. My mouth went dry. The automatic doors did not slide open. They stayed shut like they were supposed to. But the lock was off. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I kept my eyes on the clock the way the addendum told me to, because suddenly I understood that the binder wasn't warning me about burglars. It was warning me about something that didn't need to break in. The lock stayed off. 1 second. 2, 3. Then the indicator snapped back on. Tick locked again. Nothing entered. Nothing left. The doors never opened. But the store had just unlocked itself. And right after it happened, the receipt printer behind the register screamed to life. Paper fed out in a harsh, rapid stutter. The machine spat out a long strip like it was having a seizure. I flinched and grabbed it. No transaction. No barcode. No items. Just one word, repeated down the page in block letters: void. 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 The ink was so dark it looked wet. My hands started to shake. I stared at the paper, then at the register screen. It was idle. No errors. No sale. Nothing open. I hadn't touched a button. And yet the system had printed a voided receipt, like someone had tried to ring something up, failed, and then canceled. I dropped the paper onto the counter like it burned. The clock flipped to 2:18. I sucked in a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The addendum hadn't mentioned the lock. It hadn't mentioned the printer. Which meant one of two things. Either the binder was incomplete, or the binder only told you the parts you were supposed to survive. I opened it again, with hands that didn't feel like mine, flipping past Rule 1, like I could find an explanation tucked into the margins. The next rules stared back at me. 2:33. 2:47. 3:1. Specific. Clinical. Patient. I finally looked away from the binder and forced myself to scan the store again, as if my attention could make reality behave. Everything looked the same. Aisles still. Coolers humming. Fluorescent lights buzzing. Then ding. A small sound, sharp and bright, came from the counter beside the register. I froze. There was a little brass service bell. They're one of those cheap ones people tap when they want help. I hadn't noticed it earlier because it blended into the clutter of promo stands and scratch-off ticket signs. No one was near it. No one had touched it. And yet the bell rang. Once. A clean metallic note that echoed too loudly in the empty store. Then, exactly 1 second later, ding. A second ring. 2 rings like a signal. Like something confirming it had been seen. I stared at the bell until my eyes watered. The radio hissed with static for half a beat, then resumed the same song like nothing happened. My skin crawled in slow waves. Behind me, somewhere deep in the store, the restroom light flickered. And the clock kept moving patiently, crawling toward 2:33 a.m., the next time on the list. Like the night was following a schedule. And now that I'd noticed it, it wasn't going to pretend anymore. By the time my second night rolled around, I had stopped telling myself it was all in my head. I still showed up on time. Still unlocked the employee door, clocked in, tied my apron the same way. Still nodded at Marcia when she passed me off like a relay baton with a tired "see you at 6." But something had shifted. I wasn't walking into a pharmacy anymore. I was stepping onto a schedule. The store felt tighter that night, like the aisles had moved closer together when no one was looking. The fluorescent lights buzzed lower than usual, not louder, lower, as if someone had turned down the pitch of reality by half a notch. Even the radio sounded distant, like it was broadcasting from another room. I checked the binder as soon as Marcia left. Rule 2. Rule 2:33 a.m. If a customer enters and proceeds directly to aisle 7, do not intervene. Do not greet. Do not ask if they need help. There was an addendum again. Always an addendum. You will retrieve 1 bottle of sterile saline and 1 roll of gauze from stock. Place both items on the counter. Do not speak. Do not make eye contact once the items are set down. Aisle 7 contained antiseptics, bandages, gauze, wound care supplies. I swallowed. The night passed slowly until then, stretched thin by my anticipation. A trucker came in just after 1. Bought aspirin and a protein bar. Left, normal. At 1:48, a college kid stopped by for cough syrup and cigarettes. Normal. At 2:12, the receipt printer spat out a blank slip and then went quiet again. I didn't touch it. At 2:17, the door chime rang once. Nothing unlocked this time. Progress, I thought bitterly. And then the clock crept forward, One glowing minute at a time. 2:30. 2:31. 2:32. I found myself standing behind the counter without remembering moving there. 2:33 a.m. The automatic doors slid open. Not violently. Not wrong. Smooth. Polite. Like they were doing exactly what they were designed to do. A person stepped inside. At first glance, they looked ordinary. That was the unsettling part. No flickering lights. No sudden cold. No dramatic entrance. Just a thin adult, could have been a man or a woman, wearing a light gray jacket far too thin for the November night. No hat. No gloves. Their hair lay flat against their head, dark and unstyled, like it had never been cut with intention. In one hand, they carried a small brown paper pharmacy bag, folded at the top. They didn't look around. Didn't pause at the front displays. Didn't glance at the candy, the seasonal aisle, the clearance end caps. They walked straight past me. Straight to aisle 7. I felt my pulse in my teeth. I didn't follow. The rule was clear about that. I stayed behind the counter and watched from the corner of my eye as the figure stopped halfway down the aisle. They didn't reach for anything. Didn't scan shelves. Didn't browse. They just stood there. Still, facing the antiseptics. Like they were waiting for the shelves to speak first. The smell reached me before anything else. Sharp. Clinical. The unmistakable bite of antiseptic, layered with something metallic underneath. Like old pennies rubbed between warm fingers. Like blood you'd scrubbed your hands too hard to remove. My stomach rolled. My hands moved before my thoughts caught up. Saline. Gauze. I turned, walked to the stock cabinet, and retrieved exactly what the addendum specified: one bottle of sterile saline, factory sealed, one roll of white gauze, wrapped in clear plastic. I didn't grab extras. Didn't hesitate. I set them down on the counter, side by side. Then I stepped back. The figure in aisle 7 moved. Not walking so much as redirecting. Their body pivoted without wasted motion, and they approached the counter with that same unsettling efficiency. Up close, I noticed details my brain tried to reject. Their eyes weren't unfocused, but they weren't looking at anything either. They passed over me like I was a fixture. A shelf. Something permanent and uninteresting. Their skin was pale in a way that didn't match the season. Not sickly preserved. They stopped at the counter. I stared at the clock above the register. Fixed my eyes there like my life depended on it. Because something in me knew it did. The customer reached into their jacket pocket. Slowly. Deliberately. They placed something on the counter between the saline and the gauze. It was small, wrapped in clear plastic, and sealed with a strip of medical tape, yellowed with age. Inside the plastic was a dark object, roughly the size of a thumb joint. Irregular. Organic. I didn't want to know what it was. The receipt printer whined softly. Without looking, I reached out and slid the items toward the customer. They took them with the same careful grip you'd use for something fragile or dangerous. Then they picked up the sealed object. For the first time, they looked at me. Just briefly. And in that moment, I understood something cold and awful. They weren't paying for the saline. They were exchanging it. The doors slid open behind them. They left without a sound. No chime. No lock click. Just absence. I stood there long after the doors closed, my breath shallow, my hands curled into fists so tight my nails bit into my palms. The store felt wrong afterward. Heavier. The smell lingered. Antiseptic and copper, clinging to the air, to the counter, to the back of my throat. I wiped the surface where the object had rested. Once. Twice. The smell didn't fade. I opened the binder again with shaking hands. Rule 2 had a final line I hadn't noticed before. Dispose of no materials until 3 1 a.m. has passed. I looked at the clock. 2:41 a.m. The sealed object sat in the cash drawer. I hadn't put it there. I knew, with awful certainty, that if I opened it, if I acknowledged it too directly, I wouldn't make it to the next rule. The air conditioner kicked on. The radio crackled. Somewhere deep in the store, the restroom light flicked off. I leaned against the counter and breathed through my nose, slow and controlled, like I was trying not to panic in a hospital hallway. The smell stayed. Even after the doors locked. Even after the clock ticked past 3:00. Even after I told myself, over and over, that this was just another customer. Because customers browse. And whatever had walked into my store at 2:33 a.m. didn't need to. By the third night, the rules stopped feeling like instructions. They felt like traps laid out by someone who already knew exactly how I would fail. I barely slept during the day. Every time I closed my eyes, I smelled antiseptic. Copper. That sealed thing sitting in the drawer haunted me, not what it was, but the certainty that it wanted to be acknowledged. I came in early that night, hoping routine would steady me. It didn't. The store lights felt harsher, casting reflections everywhere: glass freezer doors, polished coffee machines, stainless steel shelving. I noticed my own face more than I ever had before. Pale, hollow-eyed. A man already half removed from the normal flow of things. I opened the binder again. Rule 4. Rule 4: facial expression event. If the customer turns their head and smiles, you must immediately fix your gaze on your own reflection. Acceptable reflective surfaces include freezer glass, camera monitors, stainless appliances, polished fixtures. You must not look away until the front door chime sounds twice. Do not attempt to verify departure through direct observation. The addendum was written in a tighter font. Someone had pressed harder on the keys. Do not trust peripheral confirmation. That line stuck with me. The night unfolded quietly. Too quietly. No customers. No truckers. No insomniacs. The radio played static, heavy late-night talk. Outside, the highway sounded distant, like it was miles farther away than it should have been. At 2:17, the chime rang once. I didn't flinch. At 2:33, the doors opened. The same customer came in. Same thin jacket. Same paper pharmacy bag. Same lack of hesitation as they walked directly to aisle 7. I didn't greet them. I didn't move until the clock allowed me to. Saline. Gauze. Counter. Routine. But something was different this time. The air grew colder, not sharply, not suddenly, but in the way hospitals feel cold, even when the thermostat says otherwise. The lights buzzed lower, almost vibrating through my teeth. The customer stood at the counter longer than before. I kept my eyes on the register display, pretending to read numbers that weren't there. Then I felt it. That unmistakable sensation of someone standing too close behind you. The pressure in the air. The way your skin tightens before your mind catches up. Every instinct screamed, "Don't turn around." And I didn't. Not at first. I told myself it was my imagination. Stress. Sleep deprivation. Fear filling in blanks. Then I made my mistake. I glanced up at the camera monitor. Just for a second. In the black and white feed labeled aisle 6, I saw myself behind the counter. And directly behind me. The customer. Standing inches from my back. Their head tilted slightly, like they were studying the shape of my skull. Their mouth was open. Not wide. Just enough. Smiling. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I whipped around. The aisle behind me was empty. No footsteps. No movement. Nothing disturbed. But the monitor still showed them there. Still smiling. I felt panic surge, hot and blinding. My legs twitched, ready to run, to bolt for the employee door, to get as far away from that reflection as possible. And then I remembered. Don't run. Look at your reflection. I snapped my gaze back to the freezer door beside the counter. My reflection stared back at me, distorted slightly by curved glass, eyes too wide, face slick with sweat. I locked onto it. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Behind me, I heard something move. Not footsteps. A soft, wet shift of weight. I focused harder on my reflection, counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. The hum of the freezers deepened. The store felt like it was holding its breath along with me. Then, faintly, ding. The front door chime rang once. I didn't move, didn't celebrate. The rules were very clear. Twice. Seconds stretched. My eyes burned. Tears blurred the edges of my reflection, but I refused to wipe them away. Then, ding. The second chime rang. Clear. Distinct. Final. I slumped slightly, still staring at myself, waiting for the instinctive terror to fade. When I finally dared to look away, the aisle was empty. The doors were closed. The store looked normal. Almost. I exhaled a shaky laugh. Okay, I whispered. Okay. I did it. Then the monitor flickered. Just once, and for 3 final seconds. The customer was still there, standing behind me in the feed. Smile gone. Expression flat. Watching. Then the image cut to static and reset to an empty aisle. The RA's indicator blinked off. I didn't laugh again. I didn't move for a long time. Because I understood something new then, something the binder hadn't said outright. The rules didn't make the customer leave. They only stopped it from taking me. And whatever lingered in those cameras, whatever stayed a few seconds longer than it should have, was proof that the store remembered. Even when I tried not to. I didn't turn the monitors off after that. I couldn't. After the feed reset, after those extra seconds, where the customer still stood behind me, unmoving, I left the cameras on all night. Every aisle. Every angle. Even when dawn crept in through the front windows and the fluorescent lights lost their edge, I kept glancing at the screens, half expecting the image to come back. It didn't. But the sense of being watched never left. By the time I got home, the smell followed me. Antiseptic. Copper. I showered twice, scrubbed my hands until my skin burned. But when I lay down, I could still feel it in my sinuses. When I closed my eyes, I saw that smile only in reflection, never directly. Sleep didn't come. When I returned for my next shift, Marcia didn't ask how I was doing. She never did. She handed me the binder without a word, and for the first time, I noticed how frayed it was at the edges. Not from age. From use. From being opened in the same places, night after night. I didn't go to the rules section this time. I flipped past it. That's when I found the tab. Storage and Retention Backroom Protocol. The words tightened something in my chest. The instructions were typed in the same clinical tone as the rules, but these felt different, less preventative, more logistical. All payments are to be secured immediately after customer departure. Do not inspect. Do not shake. Do not open. 1 unit per night. Storage location: back room, north wall. There was a combination written beneath it. Already filled in. I stood there for a long time before moving, aware of the cameras watching me, aware of my own reflection, ghosting across the freezer doors as I passed. The back room felt colder than the rest of the store, the air stale with cardboard dust and cleaning chemicals. I followed the north wall. At first, I thought there was nothing there. Then I knelt. The safe was built into the wall at floor level, almost hidden behind stacked boxes of saline and latex gloves. Same paint as the wall. Same texture. Like it had always been there, waiting for someone to notice. I cleared the boxes away with shaking hands. The dial was worn smooth. I entered the combination from the binder. The lock opened instantly. No resistance. No hesitation. Inside, the safe was empty. Clean. Expectant. I shut it quickly, my heart pounding, and locked it again. That night, at 2:33 a.m. the customer came back. Same jacket. Same paper bag. Same direct path to aisle 7. This time, I didn't need to reread the rules. Saline. Gauze. When they placed the payment down a sealed object heavier than the last, I didn't hesitate. I didn't look at it. I picked it up like it was radioactive and carried it straight to the back room. The moment I opened the safe, the smell intensified, not stronger, closer. I placed the unit inside and locked the door. Something shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just enough to let me know it wasn't empty anymore. I stood there longer than I should have, breathing through my mouth, waiting for the panic to hit. It didn't. That scared me more. 1 unit per night. That phrase echoed in my head as the nights stacked up. I stopped sleeping. Even when I managed to pass out, I woke up with my hands numb and cold, mottled with pale patches that looked like frost rash. No pain, just deadened skin that took seconds too long to feel warm again. The smell became part of me. Customers started noticing. A trucker named Earl, one of the regulars, paused mid-sip one night and squinted at me. "You smell like a hospital," he said. I froze. "What?" He shrugged. "This place does that. Been running this route for years. After midnight, it's like someone from the ER always stops by. Folks who don't browse, don't talk." My stomach dropped. "They go straight to the bandages," he added, staring into his coffee. "Always have." He left faster than usual that night. By the 9th unit, my hands were shaking constantly. I could feel the safe when I stood near it, a pressure, like something contained that knew it was being counted. That's when the fax machine came to life. I hadn't even realized it was plugged in. Paper screeched through, the sound sharp enough to make me flinch. I tore the page free and read it. Collection scheduled. Below it, minimum required 10 units. Maintain protocol. Failure is not an option. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m. I looked at the clock, 3:18. I had 9 units. 1 more night. 1 more customer. And then whatever had been standing behind me in the cameras, whatever smiled only when I wasn't looking, was going to be picked up. I folded the paper and slid it back into the binder. Behind me, in the back room, the safe clicked softly, like something inside had shifted in anticipation. There's a point where fear stops being useful. It keeps you alive for a while, long enough to learn the rules, long enough to obey them, but eventually it wears thin. When you're exhausted, half sick, and already marked by something you don't understand, fear turns dull, heavy, replaced by something worse: curiosity. By the 10th night, I knew the safe was changing me. My hands were mottled almost permanently now, pale patches blooming and fading like frostbite that never fully healed. The smell clung to me no matter what I did. Antiseptic. Copper. I'd stopped noticing it consciously, the way you stop noticing your own breathing, but other people still did. Earl stopped commenting. He just drank his coffee fast and left. The binder sat open on the counter, turned to the storage protocol, the fax folded neatly into the sleeve, like a promise that had already been paid for. Minimum 10 units. I had 9. Tonight would make 10. Tomorrow morning, collection. And if I was ever going to know what I was handling, what I was helping, this was my last chance. I told myself I'd just look. Not open anything. Not touch more than necessary. Just a glance. just enough to put a shape to the horror that had been living rent-free in my head. The night felt wrong from the start. The radio wouldn't lock onto a station, hissing softly, no matter how many times I turned the dial. The fluorescent lights flickered in slow, uneven pulses, as if the power itself was tired. The cameras stayed on, feeds stable but unnervingly still. At 2:09 a.m., the automatic doors slid open. Too early. My stomach dropped. The customer stepped inside without the chime sounding. Same thin jacket. Same paper pharmacy bag. They didn't go to aisle 7. They stopped. Right in the dead zone. The one blind spot. The cameras didn't cover the narrow slice between the seasonal aisle and the promotional end cap near the counter. Corporate hadn't bothered fixing it. Marcia had mentioned it once. Months ago. Like a joke. I couldn't see them on the monitors, only in my peripheral vision. Standing there. Waiting. My mouth went dry. The clock read 2:11. The rules didn't cover this. Not directly. I stood frozen behind the counter, staring at the register display like it might tell me what to do. The air felt thick, heavy with that now familiar hospital cold. The smell crept back, stronger than ever, crawling into my nose and down my throat. Then the customer moved. Slowly, deliberately. Toward aisle 7. Routine reasserting itself. My hands shook as I grabbed the saline and gauze, setting them on the counter exactly as instructed. I didn't look up. I didn't speak. The customer approached. I heard the soft thud of the payment hitting the counter. Heavier than the others. I didn't wait this time. I picked it up immediately and carried it to the back room, my heart hammering like it was trying to escape my chest. The safe waited. I knelt, spun the combination, and opened the door. The smell hit me like a physical force. Inside, the units filled the shelves. 9 of them, leather-wrapped, sealed, darkened with age. They were warm. Not room temperature warm. Body warm. As I stared, I realized something I'd been trying not to admit. They weren't still. Each unit rose and fell almost imperceptibly, like shallow breathing. A synchronized rhythm, subtle but unmistakable, as if they were all responding to the same unseen signal. Something dark seeped from the seams of the oldest ones, a viscous black fluid that clung to the leather and crept along the metal shelf. It didn't drip. It moved, slow and purposeful, like it was trying to pull itself back inside. My vision swam. I should have closed the safe. I should have run. Instead, I leaned closer. One of the units near the back had split slightly along its seam. Just enough to create a narrow opening. No wider than a finger. The darkness inside was complete. Then something shifted. A pale shape moved within the gap. Slow. Testing. A fingernail slid into the light. Human. Too clean. Too perfect. Then an eye opened behind it. Blue. Vacant. Staring directly at me from the dark. I made a sound half gasp, half sob, and stumbled backward. At that exact moment, something stepped on the other side of the door. Not rushed. Not loud. Just a single careful footfall on the linoleum outside the back room. I froze. Another step. Closer. Slow enough that I could count the seconds between them. I slammed the safe shut with shaking hands and spun the lock blindly, not caring if I did it right, just needing it closed. The footsteps continued. Measured. Unhurried, like whoever or whatever was walking knew exactly where I was. I backed away from the safe and pressed myself against the wall, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The smell was everywhere now, saturating the room, thick enough to taste. Then I heard it, from the front of the store. A sound I hadn't heard before. Soft. Wet. A laugh. Not loud. Not joyful. Just the sound of something discovering it had been seen. My blood ran cold. Because I knew without needing to look. The customer had started to smile. and I hadn't found my reflection yet. I saw the smile, not in reflection, not in glass, not on a monitor, directly. That's how I knew I'd failed. The customer stood at the edge of the counter, half in shadow, half under the fluorescent lights. Their face tilted just enough for me to see it clearly, lips pulling back in a way that didn't belong to muscles or bone, teeth showing too evenly, too patiently. My body tried to run before my mind caught up. I took one step back. Then the binder hit the floor. It must have slipped from the counter when I turned, because suddenly it was there at my feet, splayed open to a page I had never read before. Bold text. Boxed. Impossible to miss. Remediation Protocol Rule 4 failure. I didn't read it so much as absorb it. If direct visual confirmation of the smile occurs, do not flee. Do not avert gaze by force. Do not apologize. Do not plead. Retrieve the most recent unit. Offer it with both hands. Remain still. This is the only corrective action. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might black out. The customer didn't move closer. They didn't need to. The air itself felt compressed between us, heavy and cold, pressing against my chest. That antiseptic copper smell was overwhelming now, like I'd stepped into a surgical prep room. I turned slowly and walked toward the back room. Each step felt borrowed. The footsteps didn't follow me. That was worse. I opened the safe with hands that barely felt attached to my body. The combination came automatically, muscle memory I didn't remember forming. The newest unit sat at the front. It was warmer than the others, almost hot. When I lifted it, something inside shifted, a wet, careful movement that made my vision blur. I didn't look. I couldn't. I carried it back to the counter. The customer waited, still smiling. I held the unit out with both hands, arms extended, exactly as the protocol instructed. My shoulders burned from the effort of staying still. My teeth chattered, though the store wasn't cold. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the customer reached out. Their hand closed over mine. The cold was instantaneous. Not surface cold, not numbness. It went through me, down my fingers, into my wrist, up my arm like liquid ice, injected directly into my veins. I gasped despite myself, knees buckling, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. And then, I wasn't in the store anymore. I was under bright lights. Too bright. A room stripped of color, all white and stainless steel and shadowless corners. I heard the steady beep 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 of a heart monitor. Felt pressure at my temples, the weight of something holding my head still. Voices murmured nearby. Calm. Professional. Clinical. I couldn't see them clearly, but I knew they wore masks. Gloves. Gowns. Something moved between my legs. I tried to scream. No sound came out. The light shifted, and for a fraction of a second, I saw it, something small, wrong, wet, opening an eye that wasn't meant to open yet. Blue. Vacant. Smiling. I jerked back into the store with a strangled cry. The customer had the unit. Their smile was already fading, lips settling back into that smooth, neutral line like nothing had happened. The cold retreated slowly, leaving behind a deep, aching numbness that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. They turned and walked toward the doors. This time, I didn't watch. I stared at the floor and waited. Ding. Once. I didn't breathe. Ding. Twice. The doors closed. The pressure lifted. I collapsed against the counter, shaking so hard my legs couldn't hold me. My right hand burned now, the cold giving way to something worse, an ache deep in the bone. When I looked at it, my stomach dropped. There were marks. 5 pale impressions where fingers had wrapped around my hand, etched into my skin like frostbite scars. Not bruises. Not discoloration. Brands. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the floor behind the counter until dawn, watching the light creep through the front windows, waiting for the store to feel normal again. It never did. At exactly 7:00 a.m. a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. No logo. No plates I recognized. A man stepped out. Gray suit. White shirt. No tie. He walked into the store like he'd been there before, like he belonged. "Morning," he said calmly. I didn't answer. He didn't wait for one. He walked straight to the back room, knelt in front of the safe, and spun the dial without hesitation. The lock opened. He counted silently, lips moving. When he stood, he looked at me for the first time. Really looked. There was no curiosity in his eyes. No surprise. Just confirmation. "Minimum satisfied," he said. "Collection complete." I swallowed. You didn't ask for. You followed remediation," he interrupted. "That's noted." He paused. Then added, almost conversationally, "You're in the documentation now." The words landed heavier than anything I'd seen in the safe. I stared at him, waiting for the meaning to clarify itself. It didn't. He closed the safe, turned, and walked out. The sedan was gone seconds later. Behind the counter, the binder lay open to a page I hadn't noticed before. A photograph. Grainy, black and white. Taken from the security camera angle. It showed the counter. It showed the customer. And behind them, me holding a unit with both hands. Frozen in place. Documented. The clock ticked forward. And for the first time since I'd started this job, I understood something with absolute clarity. The rules weren't there to protect employees. They were there to make sure the record stayed complete. The agent came back the next morning. Not the same black sedan, but the same kind, anonymous, polished, forgettable. The sort of car you wouldn't remember seeing 5 minutes after it passed you on the highway. He walked in at exactly 7:00 a.m., nodded once like we were co-workers instead of strangers, and set a thin envelope on the counter. Cash. Neatly stacked. Counted already. "Continuation bonus," he said. "Hazard retention." I didn't touch it. He didn't seem to care. From his briefcase, he removed a single laminated sheet and slid it across the counter, right on top of the binder. "Updated procedures," he added. "Appendix revision." I looked down. The rules were the same. Same font. Same sterile phrasing. Same timestamps burned into my memory. But Appendix A had changed. The old image, the one of the aisle, the antiseptic shelf, the empty space where the customer stood, was gone. In its place was a still frame from the security camera. The angle was unmistakable. Behind the counter. My side of the store. I was in the photo. Standing rigid, both hands extended, holding a unit I didn't remember seeing taken. My face was turned slightly away from the camera, but I recognized the jacket, the posture, the pale mark creeping up my wrist. Behind me, out of focus but unmistakable, the customer stood in the blind spot's edge. And this time, they were looking directly at the camera. "Stores automatically document qualifying events," the agent said calmly. "Triggered by protocol deviation or remediation." "I didn't take that picture," I whispered. "No." He agreed. "The store did." I looked up at him. "What happens if I quit?" That was the first thing I'd said that seemed to interest him. He considered me for a moment, head tilted slightly, like he was deciding how much truth I could handle. "If you resign formally," he said, "corporate will respect that. We won't pursue you." My chest loosened. Then he continued. "But they won't need us." My stomach dropped. "The subject isn't bound to the store," he went on. "The store is just the containment point. A stable environment. Familiar architecture. Rules." He tapped the binder lightly. "If the environment disappears," he said, the subject adapts. I didn't ask what that meant. I already knew. He closed his briefcase, picked up the envelope, and pushed it closer to me. For discretion, he said, and compliance. Then he left. I quit that afternoon. Did it properly. Filled out the paperwork. Turned in my key. Didn't take the money. I packed what little I owned and drove west. Changed my number. Paid for a short-term rental with cash. Told myself that distance mattered, that stores were stores and rules only worked where they were written. The first night, I slept. The second night, I woke up at 2:17 a.m. on the dot. I didn't know why until I heard it. Ding. Once, my heart seized. Ding. Twice. The sound wasn't in the room. It was in my head. Sharp. Clear. Precise. The smell followed a second later, antiseptic and old copper, filling my nose, crawling into my throat. I sat up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, my right hand aching like it had been packed in ice. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. No store. No cameras. No aisles. Just the chime, the smell, and the certainty that something was standing just out of sight, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I lasted 9 days. On the 10th, I drove back. The pharmacy hadn't changed. Same fluorescent lights. Same highway hum. Same faint rattle in the vents. Marcia didn't ask where I'd gone. She just handed me a fresh binder and a time card like I'd never left. The money was waiting in my locker. I took it. Now I work nights again. I don't think about the units. I don't think about what's inside the safe. I follow the rules. At 2:17 a.m., I stand at the counter and watch the clock. At 2:33, I prepare the saline and gauze. I don't look at reflections unless I'm told to. I don't wonder what happens during collection. Fear doesn't help anymore. Routine does. Last night, Marcia trained someone new. Young. Desperate. Same look I must have had when I walked in off the highway with debt in my pockets, and nowhere else to go. She showed him the register, the coffee machine, the freezer doors. Then she handed him the binder. I watched from behind the counter as he flipped through it, laughing under his breath, shaking his head like it was all some elaborate joke. I didn't stop him. At 2:16 a.m., he glanced at the clock. At 2:17, the store went quiet. I stepped back, out of the camera's main frame, and waited. The rules don't protect people. They preserve the process. And the process always needs someone new to read the binder for the first time.